Hey everyone. Okay, so if you have been told that there's not much that can be done because your child has learning difficulties, because they have memory difficulties, whatever the case may be, this is for you. I talk all the time to moms who are worried sick because they, get a psychoed evaluation or some other, something else, or they just know something is really not, 100% with their child, and they do all this research and reading, and they keep coming across the same conclusion that nothing can really be done to help their child, that they just have to learn to manage this and they can't completely overcome it, and it's not treatable, or you have to learn to live with it. And I know I was told that, and it's so discouraging as a parent to hear that, whatever the case may be, because it just feels so permanent. And I'm here to tell you there's something seriously wrong with that research. So the thing is that whenever you come across this research that says, adults with learning disabilities, or who were kids, these longitudinal studies still had learning disabilities or still had dyslexia or memory issues and so forth, well, you have to look at what was the interventions that were used for these adults. And the intervention that is used for these adults most of the time are top-down approaches. So if you're using top-down approaches, that's the results you're going to get top-down results. And I say that with all the love, but those approaches are not based on addressing the root cause. And so that's where the research is really flawed, and where it's really easy to lose hope when there's absolutely no reason to do so. So you need to address the root cause. That is why these people in this research, these adults, did not overcome their learning difficulties. And you might be wondering, okay, what is a top-down approach? So let me explain. First of all, top-down approaches are modifications, and there is nothing wrong with them. I want to be clear about that. It's that when we use it as a permanent solution, or as a dad I spoke to yesterday, as the end goal, that's where we run into trouble. So the end goal should not be an IEP. The end goal should be overcoming the difficulty, or getting pretty close to overcoming it if the problem is severe. And too often the end goal is here's the IEP, and the end goal is here's the assistive technology, or here are these tricks and these strategies and so forth. So they don't optimize brain function. That's the difference. They don't look at the root cause. So top-down approaches are things like remedial reading programs, phonics. Again, nothing wrong with these things, but if there's something shaky underneath in terms of brain organization and brain development, those approaches are only going to get you so far. Other top-down approaches are things like behavior modification plans, parenting classes, counseling for anxiety, which can be totally helpful, IEPs and tutoring, tagless, seamless clothing for kids with sensory processing disorder. I almost went down that crazy path with my daughter, and we did to some extent, until I realized, what are we going to do? Be in university buying her tagless, seamless clothing? Or are we going to find out why she has sensory processing disorder? And of course, meds and IEPs, right? So top-down approaches, the problem is that they don't address the root cause, and so they really aren't paying attention to brain development, how the brain develops, and all of that jazz. And it really is important to know that top-down approaches work at the cortex, right? That's our prefrontal cortex. That's where the executive functioning happens, all those great learning skills we want our kids to have, that emotional regulation, all of that type of stuff. But the problem is that if we look at the learning pyramid, top-down approaches start up here, and that's where the cortex is, but the brain develops from the bottom up. So we need to build the brain from the bottom up, because if the cortex is weak, then definitely the lower parts of the brain, the lower brain levels, are weak as well. And we need to strengthen those, because trying to put a roof on a house that doesn't have a solid foundation is just not gonna get the results you want. You're gonna have leaking and shifting and all kinds of stuff. So basically the way it works is that the cortex sits at the top of the brain, basically, and it is the youngest part of our brain, evolutionary speaking, and the brain develops in the same way it evolved. So we think of like the reptilian brain, and then we have, you know, the higher brain, the middle brain levels and the higher brain levels. I won't get into all of neuroanatomy of it, but that's what we have to work on, is those lower brain levels, which are weak. And so they have to be developed first before the cortex is developed. That's not what we do with top-down approaches. A bottom-up approach involves sensory motor exercises, which are what develops the lower brain levels. That's what happens in infancy. If there's any skips, shifts, inconsistencies, you know, doing something too early, not long enough, doing it too long, any of that, that's going to create a shaky sensory motor development and a shaky foundation in terms of brain development. So a bottom-up approach develops the brain from the bottom up through which then allows the cortex to function optimally. So bottom-up approaches, you might be wondering, what the heck is that? So first of all, I want to start talking just by saying, obviously, the building blocks. So things like addressing, does the brain have the raw materials? You know, we need to look at nutritional deficiencies, everything from vitamins to minerals to amino acids, all of that type of stuff. We need to look at gut health. Is there an imbalanced brain chemistry going on that's affecting things? We need to look at toxicity. Is toxicity causing issues with memory impairment? You know, learning, emotional regulation, all of that. And we need to look at food sensitivities and food allergies, because if that's creating brain inflammation or throwing things off, you know, not allowing the brain to do the biochemical process that it needs to do, then obviously that's going to create problems. So those are examples of biochemical bottom-up approaches or root cause approaches. But then in terms of brain development and brain organization, we need to look at the areas of underdevelopment. So we need to look at retained primitive reflexes. We need to look at, is there one hemisphere of the brain that's overdeveloped and one side that's underdeveloped? We need to look at cerebellum development. So there's a whole lot of stuff that we need to look at in order for this up here to be working optimally. So, you know, if this is all new to you, or if this sounds too good to be true, if you're like, what the heck are primitive reflexes? You know what, I'm going to post in the comments below the study that I summarized of the primitive reflex of basically several thousand children who were studied and had retained primitive reflexes. They had learning disabilities, ADHD, all kinds of stuff. When those reflexes were integrated, these kids significantly or completely improved. So that is the difference with a bottom-up approach, and it's not as simple as primitive reflexes. I'm glad that primitive reflexes are something that's become more and more of a buzzword, and you know, is talked about, and people are developing a knowledge of that, but it definitely goes further than that as well. So basically, bottom-up approach works at developing the lowest brain levels and working its way up, and it's not focused on modifications or management as a permanent solution. So that's what I'm going to be talking more about tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern in my group, Building Better Brains. Join that if you haven't already. I'm going to be talking all about memory. So the 5, you know, things you have not probably tried to improve your child's memory issues, whether it's short-term, long-term, whatever the case may be, and what you can do by using a bottom-up approach. So let me know in the comments below, what approach do you think you're using? What is working? What is not working? And also tag or share this with anyone who you know can benefit. So thanks for watching, everyone, and I will post the link to that study, and also a link to, if you want to contact me to book a clarity call, then you can do that as well. Have a great day.